bright and shiny morning. Just gonna wait another kind of 30 seconds to let a few more people in, but we'll get started with the session in just presently. All right. So now that we have a pretty significant critical mass here, I think I'm going to take it away and get going. So, as I said, good morning and afternoon to those of you who are in another time zone than Vienna. Today, we're combining our new media incubator and our local news project in a session that everyone can benefit from. We're talking about how to be strategic and make the most out of your newsletter strategy, and additionally, how to build a strong foundation for a reader revenue business model. We all use newsletters for email marketing, providing customers with updates, promotions, upcoming events. Recently, newsletters have really important taken off as a way for writers and media companies to build a direct relationship with their readers. Newsletters can be useful for increasing engagement as well as an alternative source of revenue. For example, offering paid newsletters. Some of you are operating on Substack and might have experience with that. Something that's often also, in my experience, not appreciated enough is how effective newsletter signups in terms of selling advertising. You know a lot more about your user than when they subscribe to a newsletter than if navigating your website. Additionally, reader revenue models are an increasingly important strategy for diversifying your revenue mix as a media company, sourcing a large share of revenue directly from paying users and building those direct relationships. Emails, newsletters, revenue for that matter, may not be for everyone. This is an opportunity to learn a lot more about each of these themes. It could be because your subscription market is underdeveloped in your context, or email is not necessarily a common way to source news, or won't be a lot higher opening rates. There's other platforms through which people consume information, but all of this is really important to kind of consider and think through. Either way, we're in for a really inspiring discussion today. Francesca Baton joins us from South Africa, where she is the general manager for reader revenue at the Daily Maverick. She's responsible for their membership community, events and live journalism division, book publishing, e-commerce, and importantly, built their newsletter strategy from the ground up with one of the more forward-thinking acquisition and retention strategies, as well as success measurement strategies on the market. I was really inspired by some conversations I've had with Francesca in the past. And like I said, I think a lot of you have a similar strategies in your own business model. So I'm really looking forward to the Q&A as well. So we'll be recording the earlier part of the presentation. Just if anyone is unable to make it from your team, they will be able to view that on Pathwrite afterwards. Once the presentation is over, I'll then moderate a question and answer session as usual. But with that, I would love to hand it over to Francesca. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. I have a lot of slides to get through. So if I talk too fast or you don't know what I'm saying, just pop some questions into the chat and we'll get to them at the end. But in the meantime, let's kick off. The first thing I wanted to check, here we go. Here's my my tech issues are ready, Ryan. I'm trying to get there we go. All right. So my first question to everybody, and if you could just put it into the chat, is whether or not you already have a newsletter of some sort. If you do, just put a yes in. If you don't, put a no. I'd love to just know where we're at with it. for the majority of people. And one of the main questions that a lot of people will have is, do you actually need a newsletter? It's what we've built our entire strategy on. So I am, of course, going to say yes all the time. But as Ryan pointed out, you know, there are some places where newsletters, email just don't work. But here is the thinking from my side. Newsletters, we think we're in the business of news, but we're actually not. We're all in the business of attention. Everybody is competing for attention with Netflix. We're competing against our readers' children. We're competing against everyone. And by having a newsletter, you're bringing your strategy from being a passive strategy to acquire readers in the hope that they'll come to you into an active one where you're actually going to the readers. You're landing in their inbox in the hope of creating a habit with them. Regardless of the frequency of how often you send a newsletter, whether it be weekly, monthly, or daily, what you're doing is you're interrupting that when they wake up, that they're not going to another news site, that they're not going to Google News, they're coming to you. It's right there already in their inbox. And as Ryan's already said, there are two major revenue streams. Newsletters are a product, and immediately you're creating more space for advertisers or sponsors to be able to speak directly to your readers. And then also, very importantly for me, is the reader revenue aspect of it. We can't get reader revenue without the email addresses that newsletters give us. So whether it's a small appeal in a newsletter for people to support you, or whether it is to send them direct marketing about your product, about your news, about why they should be supporting you. All of these are the reasons that I feel that newsletters are so important. But most importantly, before we even get to the revenue, is that shift from passively hoping that somebody's going to discover you and come and read your article over anybody else's in the world, or actively coming to them and saying, hey guys, we've got, these are the top stories today, or this is the investigation we're working on, and actually letting them, actively recruiting them for your site. How are you going to do it? If you're going to do it, this is just, I put together here some of the major kind of thinking points that you need to be addressing from the very start. And I've also included this very cool and in-depth source from Maple, which is quite great, is really good on granular thinking. But if you are going to start a newsletter, it's how and where do you start? And these are some questions that I think you should address at the very beginning. Who's going to write it? Is it going to be a newsletter editor, a dedicated newsletter hire? Or are you going to get a specific journalist who might already have a big following on social media who is going to write it? How often? Is it going to be a daily, a weekly, a monthly? And understanding that the resources that's needed for it, although not huge, so don't be intimidated by it, are significant. It will take some time. Are you producing enough news to original news to be sending out it daily? Or is it something that can actually last once a month and where people get excited when it lands in their inbox? Getting an ESP, essential, so essential. So email service provider. Are you going to use MailChimp, Salesforce, Beehive? There are so many out there. And any cursory Google search, there are good people who have put together a list of the best ESPs for your market. And the things that you need to look at there are, am I going to get all the bells and whistles straight away? Or am I going to start off in a free program and test it and see how it goes with a minimal viable product, but does it have ability to scale? Because one of the most difficult things to do, and something that we're currently going through, is migrating from one email service provider to another. You spend a lot of time creating these lists, creating these segments, targeting people, and then you have to migrate it all over to another ESP because they're not big enough to be able to handle you when you have the inevitable success that you will. And then how are you going to sell it? You know, again, this is going to be resource intensive. Do you have a sales team ready to go to multiple different advertisers and get them to advertise in your newsletter? Or are you going to get one dedicated sponsor, which could be the better thing to do at an initial point as you're launching a newsletter? Get one sponsor as you grow that base until you have a critical mass where you can be charging more to more advertisers. So what makes a great newsletter? The clue is in the title for me. It's a letter. It's not an algorithm of the best stories or the most read stories on your site put together by a bot. I have this thing, maybe it is because I am a writer at heart, but if a human doesn't write it, a human's not going to want to read it. So for me, the best newsletters out there are conversational, they're personal, they feel like a letter. I'm addressed by Dear Fran, here's your top news stories for today. The 7 is a great example of keeping it short to the point. People, again, we're competing for people's attention in our business. So you don't want to fill it with everything that you've produced for the year. You want to, or in that week, you want to be putting out what are the top stories that day or what you feel that particular segment of your newsletter base are going to be interested in. And topic specific. Again, for us, we have over 20 different newsletters of varying size lists. We have our daily First Thing newsletter that goes out at 6 a.m. And then we have other newsletters. We have the COVID newsletter. We had, for South Africa, we have a big electricity problem with rolling blackouts all the time. So we have a weekly newsletter on what's happening with the blackouts, what's happening with the electricity sector, what's happening with the state-owned enterprise there. And then really importantly, keep it regular. That means same time, same place. If you decide that Thursday at 4 o'clock is the best time to send your newsletter, it suits your newsroom, you've seen from your open rates that it's a good time, people are going to be at work, but they need a distraction, then send it at Thursday at 4 p.m. religiously. Because I found that some of the newsletters that I subscribe to, and they're weekly newsletters, when I don't get it at Thursday at 4 p.m., I don't necessarily open my inbox looking for it, but I realize 2 days later, I didn't get it yet. And then I get some poor excuse the next week, oh, I forgot to send it or something like that. So you want to be able to cultivate this habit forming behavior in your readers, that they are coming to you and you're making it easy for them by giving them a free newsletter into your inbox. And I think that's a really important point, especially for us in South Africa, was to keep our newsletters free, because instead of cutting off the product to the customer or to the reader, you're actually getting them to engage in it, to see the value in it long before you start asking them to pay for it or to create revenue. The funnel. Everyone talks about the funnel. And you'll hear it in sales funnels and marketing funnels. And for the purposes of this is a newsletter funnel. And what's the point of it? The point at the very top of the funnel is your offsite marketing. This is driving awareness of your newsroom. So whether you're doing that on social media, whether you're doing that in brand campaigns, guerrilla marketing, whatever it is, that's the first time they're going to be seeing it, or they're hopefully, if you're doing it well, they're going to see your brand, your news brand a lot. And eventually they're going to come to your site. And so what you want to do is convert people to become regular readers at the top of the funnel. And then in the middle of the funnel, great, you manage your guerrilla marketing campaign, worked beautifully. You've now got them onto your site. Do not miss that opportunity. This is you get to cultivate the interest, you get to show your personality, and you get most specifically to market that you have a newsletter or that you want to collect their email address to make their experience better through a reg wall. This is where you start converting people to subscribers. Again, it sounds very complicated. It's a banner on your site saying we have a newsletter. It's free and it can be in your inbox every Thursday at 4 p.m. And then finally, at the bottom of the funnel, that's where I play most of the time. It is with readers who've been opening our newsletters for a long time. That's where we do our direct marketing to them. We've now cultivated the habit with them. We've shown them the value of our news. We've shown them the value of the newsletter product. And at that point, we're able to just simply ask them to support us. And this is also where you work on re-engaging them at all times. You engage them back into a loop to look at your more of your articles on site. Maybe you have a different product, maybe you have something to sell. This is where it happens at the bottom of the funnel. But it's just the mass at the top. Then we go down to the middle where you want people to become interested and committed to you. And at the very bottom is the loyalty. These are your super fans. There is no point in looking for reader revenue at the top of the funnel. If you're talking from a membership perspective, if you're paywall, that's usually, it happens at the middle of the funnel. But if you're looking for membership and community, or you're looking to crowdfund, that's going to happen at the bottom of the funnel. Okay. So I wanted to put together a little pre-launch checklist. If for those of you who don't have a newsletter or considering a newsletter, these are some of the questions that I would ask anybody who's thinking, and we still ask these questions every time we're launching a new newsletter at Daily Maverick. When's the best time to launch? Is it because you just wrote the newsletter and you feel now's your time, you've got the energy, it's exciting, and you were inspired? It's probably not. You need to figure out when is the best time to launch your product. Have a think about user behavior. Have a think about what's happening in your country. Have a think about, do you have enough to actually fill a newsletter that it's going to be your best piece of work? How are the resources looking like in your newsroom? Do you have time to be consistently doing this on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? Do you have a defined product? Again, you know, so often people get newsletters wrong where it's just a kind of mishmash of what they're half interested in, and they're not thinking about what the reader is really interested in. So what is your reader? Are they a business reader? Are they a young reader who wants to know about certain things? Are they a climate activist who actually wants to know exactly what's happening, not just in their neighborhood, but what's happening around the world, and create that product for them? You might find very quickly, if you launch a newsletter, that there's 3 or 4 newsletters that you can launch. So do you have an ESP, an email service provider? Have you gone and looked at all of the ones, or did you just settle on MailChimp and, you know, fingers crossed, hope for the best? What are the strategies and ways that you think appeal to you in growing? Because there are a multitude of ways of growing your newsletter, but what's going to work for your specific newsroom? And have you decided on the time and frequency? Again, a huge problem at Daily Maverick. Launch a newsletter, realize that we don't have the resources to keep it up. It becomes ad hoc, and the next thing you know, the newsletter dies. And it's okay because we have our stable newsletters going out, but we have had times where, for instance, we've started a newsletter with one of our very popular journalists, and then she just didn't have time to write it and do her journalism, and it died off, and our inboxes were filled with complaints. Where's my newsletter from her? So, you know, just make sure that, you know, you really do have or whoever's doing it, carve out that time. Do you have email addresses for your first send? It is so easy to get distracted by your ESP and your beautiful newsletter and all the fantastic articles, and then you created it and you realize you've got no one to send it to. This is when you start to call on friends, families, and followers. It can be done so easily. A very simple, we're launching a newsletter. Sign up on this form, this Google form here. You can put a little bit of paid advertising, and I mean a really little bit of paid advertising, into social media to try and get subscribers who might be interested in it. You can put it on your site. You know, are all of those assets and marketing avenues being thought about in advance of the first send? Do you have a marketing strategy? Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question on the, you know, do you have email addresses for your first send? Like what's the sort of typical marketing timeline before you would actually launch your first newsletter? Like, how much run up do you try to afford yourself in an instance like that? Obviously, I'm sure it varies, but
Look, it changes depending on your newsroom. You know, for Daily Maverick, we have this crazy luxury of having 500,000 subscribers. So what we can do is send our first newsletter of a new newsletter out to them and say, we've launched a new newsletter, we thought you might be interested. If you don't want to be on this, unsubscribe here. And we'll usually lose maybe 30 to 40%. So we have these really big, and then what happens is, and what's really important is that you keeping an eye on who's opening it after that, and making sure that you cut any of those zombie subscribers, those guys who never open, so that your newsletter is healthy. But I would say, you know, knowing how long it takes for a designer to put a banner together, and, you know, you want to put out, give yourself 2 weeks, say it's coming, you know, have fun with the campaign. And I would say 2 weeks, but because if you go too long, you'll get analysis paralysis and it will never launch. So you also, the sweet spot for me would be 2 weeks. Get everything prepared, put some money, and I mean, again, very little money out on Facebook to like-minded groups who are interested, or people who are already following you on Facebook. There's a lot of newsrooms out there who have a huge number of social media followings. So target those, but also friends and families. Send it out on your WhatsApp group to your friends and families. Get every journalist in your newsroom to do the same. You don't need 100,000 subscribers to have a successful newsletter. You know, for me, if you can get 500 to 1,000 people for that first newsletter send, you have got data. And that's where you want to be looking from. You're going to be able to judge the open rate. And, you know, there's no point in saying I've got a 50% open rate if your newsletter is only 2 people. I would say give it 2 weeks, but don't give yourself too long, because you'll get stuck in analysis paralysis. And then finally, is it shareable? You know, one of the big problems with having a newsletter that's paid for is that it cannot be shared. And at the beginning of the journey, you want to be able to create a critical mass. So my feeling is keep it free. Remind people at the bottom, if you like what you see, if you know somebody who might be interested in this, feel free to send it to them on WhatsApp. Have a WhatsApp button there available to share, put it out on, have a X button to share on X, have a Facebook button. These are the small little things that can be happening in the background and getting you subscribers without you having to do any action. So this is what I would think of before you do a newsletter pre-launch checklist. Okay, let's see. How are we all doing? Did I rush through that too much? Do we have any questions about a newsletter before I move on? Because we do have a little bit of time. No? Okay, let's look at how we're going to monetize the newsletters. So for me, when it comes to reader revenue, the starting point is to focus on what supporting your newsroom means. So at Daily Maverick, we run a voluntary membership. The reason we do that is that South Africa is an incredibly poor country, desperately in need of information and access to journalism. So for us, we were never going to put up a paywall. We just couldn't do that in a country like South Africa. We now have 27,000 active members after 5 years, and they're paying recurring payments on a monthly or annual basis. It accounts for about 40% of our revenue, and we have a retention rate of 87% after 4 years. So that means the people who joined us 4 years ago are still with us. So this is something that I actually want you just to take a moment to think about, which is, and maybe you want to share some of your answers in the chat, or you just keep them, put them in your head. Why do you exist? Why does your newsroom exist? Who are you serving? And why is that important? You know, what's the point? What happens if you don't get the support of funding? What happens if you don't get funding support, whether it's from your reader revenue or whether it's from your advertisers? And then what happens if you do? And I'm going to hazard a guess, because I've done this exercise with a few newsrooms, that regardless of the size of your newsroom, or the different countries you might live in, or the different economic situations that you're on, or the different focus areas that you might be looking at, the answers to each of these questions will be the same for each newsroom. Why you exist is to serve a specific reader need. It is to share information that you're passionate about. That's your purpose. That's why your newsroom exists. If you don't get the support, particularly at the moment, with the state of funding for local newsrooms and newsrooms around the world, I mean, we in South Africa have had multiple newsrooms closed down in the last 5 years. That's what's going to happen. It comes down to not being able to survive. And what happens if you do is growth. And that's not just growth of your bank accounts and everything stays the same and suddenly everybody gets paid and there's no stress over your weekly or monthly wage bill. It's you're actually able to employ more journalists. You're able to do more investigations. You're able to do more journalism. And using this as your starting point when it comes to reader revenue, this is your unique selling proposition. So whatever it is specifically to your newsroom, this is where I would always start. I would start this every marketing meeting with this conversation. I would start every appeal that you might have, and I would remind your team often, particularly if there are people in your team who are not so au fait with the idea of reader revenue, this is a great thing to start with. Okay, so I've really simplified this. There's paywalls and there's memberships. For me, paywalls are anything that's freemium, anything that is essentially you're paying for the journalism. It's transactional. It works very well in a lot of countries. It can't work in South Africa, and it doesn't work here, as this has been proven multiple times over and over again. So membership really shows that journalism is the benefit, whereas paywalls tell it is. And for me, a paywall is transactional, membership is emotional. When I talk about membership, I'm talking about donations, crowdfunding, or what we have, which is a highly engaged membership community, which is very much at the core of who we are. And we use our members, we engage with our members on a daily basis. The Guardian, for example, have a membership that is essentially just a donations, a donation kind of membership. They appeal in the same way that we do to the emotional side of the reader. They don't force them to pay. They keep the journalism free, and they've been incredibly successful doing that. They also don't waste time on benefits, which we do, because again, they just feel that the journalism is what people want. I do think that some benefits are good, and I'm going to go into it here. But I mean, I say that because we do it. Maybe I wouldn't if I worked at the Guardian. So I wanted to kind of bring you through this as well. These are, again, 3 big buckets with multiple little buckets within them. But if we look at paywall, membership, and crowdfunding, 3 of the biggest buckets. One is transactional, one is emotional, and one is collaborative. In a paywall, readers are just paying to gain access to your journalism. It's the same as, buying a piece of a loaf of bread at a shop. It requires a pretty high investment in a tech stack, meaning just to be able to erect a paywall is not a particularly simple thing to do. You always have to have always-on marketing with it. There's no benefits, which from a resource perspective is actually a really good thing. The benefit is the journalism, but for your newsroom, if you're strapped for resources, it's useful. But you also get a high churn rate. In South Africa, we have about the paywall newsrooms. Ryan, you'll be able to tell me a little bit what it's like globally, but over here, it's the churn happens about 3 to 4 months. In our membership, as I mentioned earlier, we have an 87% retention rate after 3 years. Now, the very important point of this is that your paywall is going to get you way more subscribers, way more contributors initially, because it's a simple, you have to pay to read this. So we had an option of doing this. At the time, we had about 150,000 subscribers. we considered doing it. We thought that, actually, I'd say we considered it, we didn't, but we had to put the option on the table. And it was, we would have been sustainable within a month. And to put it into perspective of where we were close to closing. We had 2 months' salaries in the bank account, and we needed to do something fast. It's taken us 5 years to acquire 27,000 members, which a paywall probably could do in a month, but we've retained them. And the biggest problem for paywalls is trying to get people back. But because there isn't that emotional connection that a membership can create or cultivate, it's very, very difficult to do that. Membership you can build while you fly the plane. You can keep building it out, creating more engagement, creating more. You don't need an awful lot of tech to begin. In fact, I would say you need minimal. I would even suggest that you just need a bank account and the ability to put a banner on your site. You have to have always on marketing as well. It is community centric and high engagement, but that has a knock-on effect to the editorial team in a positive way. It has a knock-on effect to your reader numbers. It has a knock-on effect to your newsletter subscriber numbers. I mean, one of the greatest parts of the strategy of deciding to go with membership instead of a paywall is that when everyone else was erecting paywalls, they decided to come to us, and we were ready for them with that on-site messaging. And we've now grown to over 500,000 newsletter subscribers. We have 600,000 registered users. So we have this huge database. And most importantly, for a country like South Africa, where, you know, our political situation is tenuous at best, we've grown our readership from about 2 million readers a month to over 10 million a month. So that's what keeping it free, keeping it open can do. It'll take you longer to get the subscribers in, but also and the way we think about it in the membership team is every member we get, or every 100 members we get, we go, great, that's another journalist. And that's how we think, or now we can afford the next piece of tech. So it really works like that, and we have low churn. Crowdfunding, I have to say, I absolutely love. I think it is a brilliant way of getting reader revenue, particularly if you do it properly. So it requires very little tech. I mean, it's literally a back a buddy type of campaign. You need to have a date specific for the end of the campaign. So it's not about a huge investment for all year round marketing to keep it always on. You want to raise funds for a particular news story or an investigation you want to do, and you can have kind of minimal engagement. It would be good to be, and when I say that, that's thanking somebody. It's maybe updating them with a letter 1 month in to tell them how it's progressing. And it's a once-off contribution is the issue with that. Both paywalls and memberships are reoccurring. But if you need cash fast for an investigation, I can't recommend crowdfunding enough. We've just done our first one, and I hope that I'll have time to bring you through it. Okay, let me talk a little bit more about membership. I've talked a lot about this already in terms of the cause-driven membership appeals and why that's so important. You'll see I've said retention starts here. And for those of you who have spotted it, acquisition hasn't even finished yet by the time we start retaining our members. And what I mean by that, and what we have discovered, is that in the traditional reader revenue journey, you acquire somebody in, they come to your site, you engage with them, they sign up, they decide to pay, and you hope to retain them. With us, we engage, and when we send our marketing appeals to them to become a member, to join our community, the connection that we have forged with them, both with the habit making through the newsletters and also through the wording of and the idea of this genuine community that they are going to become part of our journalism, before they've even finished putting in the credit card details, they have decided to stay. And we know that from multiple surveys with them, people we've surveyed from 3 years ago to recently. We then engage them with all of not just the continuous engagement of our news, but also the community engagement. We continue to retain them and then we engage them again. So engagement really is the core of membership. It's the core of retention. And it's something that is really incredibly beneficial to the newsroom in return. Having said that, these benefits that you use to engage your members and to make sure that they're actually, you know, in it, pace yourself. You know, it can be so overwhelming to newsrooms. They think that they must have a partnership with a sandwich shop that's going to give each of their members a free sandwich once a month and then a discount at the gym. And, you know, suddenly you've got this loyalty program that has nothing to do with your journalism. And it takes up all of your time and resources going to third parties. My advice would be to start simple with no benefits, because show them that journalism is the key. Then if I had, of the benefits that we have, the one I would never get rid of is our member-only newsletter that has 0 news in it. And it is a behind-the-scenes look into our newsroom. And it's an opportunity for our members to get to know our journalists more, to find out, you know, to be a little bit silly, to show them that we're human, to throw them our meme of the week, whatever it might be. It has an incredibly high engagement rate. And this is actually where we did crowdfunding for a recent project that we needed cash for quickly. So, but you can add in other simple benefits, you know, ability to comment on articles, ad-free browsing, member-only webinars. They're not going to cost you a lot. They're not going to take a lot of effort. And a lot of them will just be running in the background. So this is some of the ways, when I say the benefits actually help Daily Maverick, these are just some of the ways that we've marketed them as benefits to our members, but in actual fact, they've been helping us. So I was one of the very first people to sign up to Maverick Insider, our membership community. And about 3 days later, I got a phone call saying, "Hi, would you like to be our email girl?" And part-time email girl. And then I said, okay, and here I am. So most of the people that we've hired into Daily Maverick have already been insiders. I'm not saying it's a prerequisite. You can get a job here if you're not, but it does tend to be the same. People have offered us space for events for free. You know, your members tend to be the people, particularly if they're paying for a free service, they tend to have resources. So we've been able to have events with a space for free, with some of our members just hosting the event on our behalf. But one of the ones that my favorite benefits is the expertise. We invited our members to join our expert database, where they put down what they're an expert in, what they're qualified in, their name, email address, and phone number. And they put it down into a form with the knowledge that our journalists can contact them if they need to. In this thousands and thousands of people who put their name down, you've got water sanitation specialists, you've got town planners, you've got rights activists, you've got lawyers, you've got, I mean, it is just unbelievable. And the amount of times that our journalists have been able to turn to an expert for a quote or for some clarification on something, or the business has been able to turn to somebody and say, can you help us? I mean, it is countless. So they feel like it's a benefit because they're part of your journalism. It's a real actual benefit to the newsroom. So with a membership, yes, it can be a little bit intimidating to begin with, but you're actually crowdsourcing this help and these resources from your readers, as well as their financial contributions. So again, I would look at thinking about some pre-launch activities before you go with reader revenue. The number one is don't be scared to launch with a minimal viable product. And I mean that. There was one person, I every time somebody signed up to our newsletter, or sorry, to our membership, I manually wrote them an email back. And it is possible, and it's very easy to do it. I would use it as an opportunity to test your assumptions. One of the biggest assumptions that we make is that our readers understand our industry. The truth is that they don't. They understand the industry they work in. they don't think past reading the news of the story. They don't think about who creates it. They don't think about how much it costs or why suddenly paywalls or reader revenue is in existence, because it didn't used to be 10 years ago. So you're going to have assumptions that people understand the value of journalism. And the truth is, the very sad truth is that they don't. So I would use, survey your readers, test your assumptions of what you think that they would want, or that maybe you think that they want to have a benefit that you will spend a lot of time and investment in, but actually it's of no interest to them. They just want to see you doing your jobs. And get that data from the early adopters. I would adopt an experimental mindset. I still love our membership mindset at Daily Maverick, because it still feels so new. If we fail at something, we just know that we're not going to do that again. But if something goes well, then we scale it. It takes away the fear and that paralysis, or that analysis paralysis, that I think that you can get so wrapped up in. I would prepare for success. That means that making sure that when the revenue starts to come in, to allocate some of that to your membership team, because your membership team will need to grow. And then also, AI is your friend. I know that that is a terrible thing to say to newsrooms, but automated emails, AI design tools, how can you use AI cleverly that is going to reduce the number of actual humans doing this work? Again, a launch checklist, payment model will be very important for you to think about. Again, is your value proposition defined? That little exercise I brought you through of what is your purpose, what happens if you don't get the funding, what happens if you do get the funding, that is the central message to all of your marketing appeals. Do you have customer support? Or is there going to be one person freaking out and manually answering? Or even worse, is your editor-in-chief going to find themselves late at night answering emails? That's not what you want to happen. You want to make sure that there's somebody or something, a bot, perhaps in place to answer those. Can members pay what they want? In South Africa, again, it was really important for us that we didn't dictate how much somebody contributes. And sometimes we get contributions that are less than $1 a month. And other times we get contributions that are $100 a month. So if you think that by letting people choose the amount that they want to pay, that they would pay less, we've actually found the opposite. We found that people are have a psychological nudge to go for a little bit more than what's on the screen. Do you have FAQs? Is the checkout process easy? All of this is available. There are multitudes of sites dedicated to telling you how to have a great landing page. But my kind of thinking around this really is just to be able to iterate easily, to start, to launch, and actually give it a chance. I'm really running out of time here, so Ryan, I want to talk very quickly about some.
Go for it. Finish acquisition, and we'll take it from there.
Okay, so basically, how are you going to get people? This is on-site messaging. Ours most successful channel is the monthly direct mailers, and that's why it's so important to have those newsletters going and to have that email list growing. So we changed our monthly direct mailers, which we only sent out once a month. We changed it to weekly. We used to get about 200 people signing up a month. We now have 800 to 1,000, just because we increased the frequency of it. Post article footers, instead of keeping them at the bottom, particularly if you do long form journalism, get them up the top. This is the kind of what we're looking at these days. This is a mailer that I would send out. So you can see it's very conversational, and it's drawing the eye down with those very short and snappy lines and a nice big green button. We've done all sorts of color psychology testing what buttons work best. And then when we've noticed that perhaps 1,000 people would click on one of these mailers, but only 200 people would sign up. So straight away, we created an automated email to go out a few hours later with a Q&A saying, we saw that you were interested in joining Maverick Insider. Do you still have some questions? Here are some answers. But the point is that we speak about the impact of our work often, and that is what membership is based on. That's what all reader revenue should be based on, whether it's a paywall or membership, is to talk about the impact of journalism and why they need you, why you need their support. Again, on-site messaging, don't waste time with small little banner placements. If you can, a nice big ribbon. The more space that you have to have that emotional connection, the longer you're going to retain that person for. And be nimble. Don't just put something up and forget about it and come back to it in a month and wonder why nobody's signing up. It's because they've seen it every day and they can't see it anymore to it. And then we go on to the crowdfunding, which I think I'm going to have to wait. I'll send it in the presentation, which I'll share with you guys all. But it's essentially how we created a crowdfunding campaign. I did want to go over this, Ryan, which is that measuring success. How do you measure success in your reader revenue? The initial goal is, can we cover existing payroll? And year onwards, can we grow our newsroom? We use OKRs and stretch goals, but very importantly, we also have a mission and vision that is aligned to Daily Maverick's mission and vision. So the reader revenue teams, the Daily Maverick mission is to defend truth. The reader revenues team is to sustain truth. And we achieve this mission by implementing OKRs. I know that many of you had an OKR session with Ryan earlier, so you should be okay with it now. But then we measure the success based on quantifiable results. So for instance, our objective was to be the best reader revenue program in the world. And this is the key results that we attach to it with the very specific measurements. And, you will all have individual versions of this. You start off, but that's what you need when you're starting the strategy, is to be thinking about what's the mission, what's our vision, what's our objective, and what are our key results that are going to get us there. Because I think that any strategy without that is an issue. And this is just some final thoughts that I'll leave up there for you all to read.
Great. Thank you so much for